reading books, but also presenting this from hands-on experience, Dr. Joseph Atta-Mensah. My name is Paul Kamau, currently Director of Research at the Institute for Development Studies, University of Nairobi. And I'm joined with colleagues in academia, in practice, our distinguished student, and all friends of development studies who join us this afternoon in Nairobi. I want to welcome you all and to say that this is very timely, especially for Kenya and East African region, for two reasons. One is that we are all part and parcel of African Union. We may be having different knowledge of how African Union operates and how its financing architecture is. And just last weekend, it was a turn for East Africa to appoint the chair for African Union Commission. And Kenya had one of its senior politicians in the race. And of course, the seat went to Djibouti, and we join in congratulating the new chair who is taking over from His Excellency Musa Faki. But this afternoon, we are not talking about politics, but looking at the financing architecture or financing model of African Union. And our able presenter today will be speaking to us about the whole financing model that African Union has adapted since its inception. And where do we stand in terms of standing for integration, for trade liberalization, and for connecting and peace-building initiative in Africa? So Professor Dr. Joseph Atta-Mensah, who is with us this afternoon, is a distinguished scholar, having worked initially and for many years in African Union. He is a distinguished senior fellow at the Africa Center for Economic Transformation, that is based in Ghana. Prior to his retirement in 2023 August, he served as a political policy advisor in Macroeconomics and Governance Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, popularly known as UNECA. During his tenure at UNECA, Joe led teams that provided critical policy advisory services to national, subnational, and regional institutions, supporting them in the development of strategies, programs, and projects. At UNECA, Joe held other key leadership positions, like the director of the Office of Strategic Planning and Program Management, where he was responsible for overseeing program planning, policy coordination, and UNECA programs of work. He also served as the Director, Regional Integration, Infrastructure, and Trade, focusing on research and analysis of regional integration, infrastructure, and trade policy issues across Africa. In this capacity, he advised government, the African Union Commission, regional economic communities, popularly known as REC, and other stakeholders on matters related to regional integration, infrastructure, trade, and macroeconomic policy. Backward a bit, before joining UNECA in 2004, so Joe has had a stunning 19 years of work experience in AUC. Joe worked as a senior economist at the Bank of Canada, where he was involved in policy formulation in terms of strategy in the economy. He holds a doctorate degree in financial economics from Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada. He has authored numerous peer-reviewed scientific articles, which in his area of interest encompasses regional integration, macroeconomics, monetary economics, and economic development, reflecting his deep commitment to advancing economic transformation in Africa. Colleagues, you will agree with me that we could not have had a better speaker for the day to speak to us about the insights about operation and the dream at African Union, and more specifically, how we can realize the dream of strengthening regional integration in Africa, infrastructural development, trade, and macroeconomic policies in the region. Without clarity and strengthened financial modality, aspiration in African Union will remain a mirage. That's my hypothesis. But we are really honored to have Professor Joseph Atta-Mensah to speak to this topic. Perhaps his hypothesis and mine are not valid, or his presentation is going to contrast these. So join me in welcoming Professor Mensah to make his presentation for about 15 to 25 to 30 minutes. After that, we are going to have discussants with two discussants, Simon Longo and Oscar Otele, who I'm going to introduce to you later on. For now, I pass the mic and the floor to Professor Joseph Atta-Mensah. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Kamui, for the kind words and for the introduction. At times when you are, when one is in such gathering, you are not really sure whether what they say about you is really you, but you're very kind with your words. Thanks to the organizers, and let me say thank you to Professor Amonya for getting me here, because he's the one who made this happen, and I'm grateful to be able to come to you to share ideas. And I hear that most of the participants are students, PhD students. So I hope I'm able to inspire them to be able to work on these difficult issues, and maybe be able to help the AU to advance its development agenda. So I think I'm going to share my slide, my slide now. Okay, can you all see it? Is it? You can see it?
Yes, perfectly okay. Yes.
Okay.
We can see.
Thank you.
Joe, proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I just want to share with you guys is, with everyone, is for us to picture a situation where we have a farmer with his family living in somewhere on the hills of Kenya. He has very arable land, but he gets donations of food from the kindness of the neighbors around him for him and his family. And they keep enjoying the generosity that is extended to them. So with time, the children of the farmers forget how to farm. They forget how to fish because they were getting the supplies. And then one day, the neighbors, one of the neighbors passed away, and another neighbor passed away, and the food stops coming. So there's panic in this farmer's family. This is the story that Africa faces. This is the story that the African Union faces. We all have this dream of a united Africa. We have this dream of a prosperous Africa. But yet, in order for us to get there, despite the immense resources that we have in terms of mineral resources, human capital, and what have you, the African Union, which we all have a dream of, is financed by an external partners.
Prof. Mensah?
So if we look to this
Professor
farmer,
Mensah?
yes, please.
I don't know whether it's only my end that the slides are not moving.
Oh no, I've not moved it. No, don't worry, I've not moved it.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm just setting the stage for my presentation. I've not moved it.
Sure.
So in a sense, linking it to this farmer, then we have a challenge. So one day, we all know what's going on in the US with US aid. I don't need to bore you. So it's a wake-up call for us to say, look, if this funding stops coming, what do we do? And so this is something which we've been wrestling with for a while. Oh, so now, really, I cannot move my slide now. What happened? You're right, yeah? I cannot move the slides now. Pascaline, is there any technical assistance you can offer?
You can't move the slides?
Yeah, I now need your help. Okay, let me try again.
Try again.
Okay.
I'm sure.
Okay, so, oh, good. Thanks,
Okay.
Pascaline, for your technical advice. So what are the key messages that I want to leave us with? In case you leave, what I'm going to discuss with you is that the African Union, needs predictable, adequate resources to implement this program. We should be able to get the African Union to at least bear 100% of its operational budget. It should bear 75% of its program budget and 25% of its peace and security. I know that a lot of countries have raised concerns about it, but what do I think we just need to do is to provide a working formula, which we've all agreed that we should just levy 0.2% of all external revenues, external imports coming onto the continent, to be a way of paying for our resources so as to reduce our dependence on the foreign. The Union has a brilliant vision, and our vision is to create an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. This is what we want to do. This is where we are envisioning where Africa would be. So with this in mind, and let's always put in the backdrop of this farmer analogy that I gave, if we are going to depend on neighbors to provide us food, how are we going to achieve our dream of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa? So to achieve this vision, we therefore need resources. Now, we know that this has been a contention since the transformation of the Organization of African Union to the African Union. Sorry, the Organization of African Unity to the African Union. Studies have been done. It's always the point that we say that we need adequate, reliable, and predictable resources to implement the programs that we have. But unfortunately, the model that we use is similar to what we had at the OAU, where we always call on our partners to help us. And we all know this adage: whoever calls the piper, or whoever pays the piper calls the tune. So if we want to be able to control the way we want to make progress, then it's incumbent on all of us. And it's incumbent on the African members of the African Union, member states of the African Union, to fully own the programs it wants to advance. A bit of history here. In 2001, that was the last meeting of the OAU, this topic came up, that as we transform ourselves into the African Union, we need predictable funding. In 2006 in Banjul, this came up again, and that led to the setting up of the President Obasanjo's Committee on Alternative Funding. And what it proposed, the finding proposed that maybe what we could do in terms of financing is let's put $2 on hospitality levy in every hotel. Whenever we visit the hotel, the guests of the hotel will contribute $2. Others also suggested maybe we can add $10 to airfares. So for every air flights visiting Africa, every flight coming into Africa, tickets would attract about $10 more. However, member states who owned airlines disagreed with that because they felt that it would be very expensive and it would discourage African airlines because, to begin with, the airline business is very, very challenging. So in 2014, at the joint conference of the ECA and AU, the findings were presented, but again, it became a challenge that it was not adopted. So another study was asked for the ECA and the AU to carry another study, but the principles on which this the study should be carried on is to see how can we have any financing formula would have to be fair, it has to be predictable, and it has to be flexible, and it must be easy for member states to be able to become compliant. So this work went on for a while, and the first thing the study proposed was what is known as the Johannesburg decision, is that the member states agreed that they would pay for the operational budget. What is the operational budget? It's to pay for the staff of the African Union Commission, is to pay for maintenance of the headquarters, is to pay for other things, which has nothing to do with the programs. Then it agreed that instead of making the external partners rely on the, instead of letting the external partners pay, like the EUs and others, pay for the programs of the Union, the member states of the Union would bear 75% of the program budget. And then it was also said that, well, peace and security issues generally, it's peace and security issues on the continent, although it affects people on the continent, at times it comes from outside. And so therefore, maybe what we could do is Africa should be allowed to bear 25% of it, and the 75% we can ask around for help. So this is the working formula, and the AU, member states of the AU have agreed to hit these targets. But I would like to share with you again, with my knowledge of the farmer, we are not there yet. We are not hitting these targets. So what is the principle of the 2016 decision of the African Union to impose a 0.2% levy on eligible imports coming into the continent to support us to become self-reliant or self-financing goal. Our calculations from the work that we did is that if we imposed this levy, it's going to attract about 1.2 billion. And we felt that this is a very small figure. Just imagine, for every import of $100 that comes onto the continent, 20 cents would go to the AU. Just 20 cents. It's small. It's not burdensome. It's not going to break. It's not going to be hard. It's not going to, and it's not going to discourage imports into Africa. So for every import, the AU is going to get some funding, and this is going to be self-reliant, you know. And as you use, I'll show you shortly, the amount of money that would come in would be more than what the budget of the AU needs. And the most important thing is that this becomes predictable and it becomes sustainable in the long term to be able to finance the programs of the AU. Let's look at whether we've been able to meet the Johannesburg target. For the operational budget, generally we hit the 100%. We're able to, from now, we've been able to do. But look at the most important thing, which is the programs. We started in 2015 at around 5.3%, and we peaked in 2019 at 45%. Post-COVID, we're back to 12%. So you see where we are. When it comes to peace support operations, it was flat, 0. We peaked in 2005.3%, and we did well in 2024 with 11%, but it's not impressive. It's not impressive. So if you put everything together, and I show you this graph, you realize that most we are not able to achieve. We have an assessed contribution, which member states only paid, as of 2024, we only contributed 12%. And partners are the ones who are paying the piper. So you figure out what is going to happen to us. Again, let's picture the farmer. So again, member states then decided we're going to approve only the member states' contribution to the union, or the budget of the union will be capped at 250 million in 2020. And in 2024, it was reduced to 200. This has made it very difficult for AU to be able to carry its programs. We'd have a lot of implications with that. The structures of the AU keeps growing, and we keep becoming dependent on the external partners to bail us out. So currently, the current realities of the AU is that we have, over the years, we've expanded. We have about 60 structures that have been approved by the Assembly. Our budget on this structures is costing us about $442 million US. And the sustainability of these structures are uncertain. And the budget of the AU keeps growing, and the total budget is now estimated at 1.4 or 1.5 billion. How are we going to pay for this? If you look at our assessed contributions, we've never paid up. The highest we've only paid is 88%. 12% of the member states don't pay. So 12% are under sanctions. And if you're under sanctions, you cannot speak at the assembly, although you're a member, you are denied certain priorities. So we've got to do something about this situation, this precarious situation. We assessed our contribution in 2023 at 205 million. We could only collect 181 million. It's a lot of money, though, I must say. But for the things that we need to do, we need more money. If you look at it, how much in terms of, we also have a peace fund. The peace fund, I think we've done well. It's voluntary contribution, assessed contributions, and we have legacy funds. So in total, at the moment, it has about $400 million, which is not bad in terms of that. But, you know, the conflict situation cost us a lot of money. So we still depend on external financing of our peace and security issues. So because we have embarked on money and trying to raise more money, member states have said, look, we also need some reforms. So they would like the union or the commission, African Union Commission, to have long-term planning. They want to have budget ceilings so that the budget doesn't go beyond reasonable. It's reasonable. And they want revenue and expenditure forecasting, so it offers for better planning, and it's streamlined most of its budget preparation process, such that it's done in terms of online meetings and all that to do the budgeting. Now look at what we have in terms of this graph. If we have the potential, because in terms of our resources, we can generate over 1.2 billion. But if you look at what we have now, we have operations budget, which is under 200. We have programs, which is also around 200. And so and we have peace and security, which is over 200 and around 300. So around 300. So in all, the budget of the AU is, in terms of estimated. So, but what I think the AU wants to say is that, you look, if countries are able to implement the 0.2%, see the difference. They could even have a surplus which they could use for themselves to do their own development agenda. So this shouldn't be that difficult. But unfortunately, it's only 17 countries that have implemented the 0.2%. Most countries are a bit resistant to do that. Some of them have said, no, we shouldn't do it because it's not WTO compliant, because whatever we do, we have to. But I have news for you. The EU imposes, how does the EU fund itself? Based on the percentage, based on the size of the economy, a percentage of funding comes from the gross national income. It's a percentage of that every country contributes to. They also have imports duties to pay for that. So it's not that restrictive. And of course, 0.2% is not much. For every $100 import, it's only 20 cents. It's not going to break the bank of importers. The island country says it's too much for them. They're small, the economies are small. If you impose this levy, it will break them. And the other argument is that we have very weak enforcement mechanism, and therefore this is not the way to go. So the question is, we now belong to a global community. We have to come up with climate funding. We have to have development funds. We have to have blended financing. We have to use PPPs. All this must be something that we should consider as a way of sustainable financing innovative, in addition to the 0.2%. In addition to the 0.2%. And we could do this by the AU partnering with AU NEPAD, have champions, we should create the financial institutions such as ADB and Afrexim Bank, and the private sector must be involved to help us to get this funding. The AU should also continue with its budget and financial reforms for enhanced efficiency and effectiveness. We should also use digitalization and automation for our system, blockchain, all those things. We should have clear division of labor, and we should use resource-based management to be able to achieve our budgeting situation. So what do I want to leave you with before we go? I would want to say that if we really want to achieve this goal, whereby an entrepreneur, a young guy in Nairobi who has a business on technology, would be able to seamlessly be in Dakar to sell his goods. An Ethiopian who has coffee and wants to ensure that coffee gets to the table of a citizen in Ghana should, under the AFCFTA, be able to do that. The same applies to an entrepreneur in Habroni who would want to sell his goods in Marrakesh, Morocco, should be able to do that. But how are we going to do that? How are we going to be able to say that I am in Maputo and I want to just take a holiday and drive from Maputo all the way to Cairo? How are we going to do that highway? How are we going to achieve Madame Zuma's dream of a fast train to go from Johannesburg all the way to Alexandria? How are we going to connect Dakar to Djibouti? All these are within our dreams, are within our reach. And I believe that the time is now. The time is not yesterday. We have to stop dreaming. We have to stop these seminars, which I'm giving now, should be obsolete. And we should come to a time that Africa itself has been able to finance itself, because we risk, if we don't, where 60% of our contribution is coming from, over 60% is coming from outside the continent. What if one day, with what is happening in America, happens in the EU, and they begin to put a squeeze on their own foreign aids? Would we be able to continue? Would the AU be able to stand on its feet? This is the puzzle that I want us to leave you with. But I believe that I am an optimist. I believe that we can. And the call for us to act so that we can attain the continental agenda of development of our continent rests with the 0.2%. Let's do it. And let's convince our leadership to be able to do that. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph Atta-Mensah, for this very informative, insightful, and also very educative lecture or seminar. coming from an insider point of view. I like the simulation and the analysis that has come into this, looking at all the scenarios of solution. Thank you also for saving us time. I think you've done it in about 25 minutes, so we still have 5 minutes of your time. And I want to immediately invite the two discussants. And I will start with Mr. Simon Mlongo. And Simon, you will have about 10 minutes to discuss this. But just before then, allow me just to say a few words about Simon before he takes over the floor to make his presentation. I understand you have a presentation to make in rejoinder to this that Dr. Mensah has ably presented. So who is Simon? And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Mr. Simon Mulongo is a seasoned defense and security consultant with expertise in governance, peace, and security. At the moment, he is the managing partner of Emans Frontier Kenya Limited that is based in Kampala. From 2017 to 2021, Simon served as the Deputy Special Representative of African Union Commission in Somalia, popularly known as AMISOM. Additionally, he chaired the AU Technical Working Group on Joint Strategic Assessment in Sahel from 2021 to 2022. He was also the director for the Eastern African Standby Force Secretariat from 2007 to 2010. A former Ugandan member of parliament between 2011 and 2016. He led the Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs. He also contributed immensely to the formulation of the East African Security Strategy and the AU African Peace Security Architecture apps. Mr. Mlongo, in terms of education, is a graduate of the National Defense College, Kenya, and holds a master's in international affairs from University of Nairobi, an MBA in finance from Fairfax University in USA, and is a certified public accountant. So, from presentation by Dr. Mensah, taking a security and a governance angle, we want to hear your comment, Honorable Mulongo, in terms of where do we stand, and especially also having been in Parliament, what is the acceptability of the proposal among the politicians and the legislators? Join me, colleagues, in welcoming Honorable Simon Mulongo to give his remarks in 10 minutes maximum. Over to you, Simon. You have the floor. If you can put the slideshow in presentation mode. Not yet. The presentation mode is down your screen. And thank you all. We are requesting that if you can put your comments on the chat so that we can pick them. In the interest of time, we may not have everyone speak, but we will do our best to hear some of the voices. But for now, is the opportunity for Mr. Simon Mlongo. Simon, if you can unmute yourself. Simon,
I'm trying to share.
Okay, thank you. At least you have unmuted. Are you saying something?
Yes, I'm trying to share, but
It's already on our screen. It's just a matter of pressing the full presentation.
I was given some education, but it looks like you have a hiccup.
Don't worry, don't worry. We shall receive the PowerPoint mode as opposed to presentation. It's in the slide mode. If you can go to your screen and on the right hand side bottom, there's an icon looking like a wine glass. When you press that, what do you get?
Now I get yes, your screen sharing and share.
I
Are we
think it's
there?
already there. Can you pull it down and then do a fresh when it's already in a full presentation mode?
Okay. I stop sharing and then I do that.
Sorry for Yes, yes, and then you do that. We see whether it's going to work. Put the document in full presentation mode.
Uh,
Thank you. And now do the sharing. If it can't work, then proceed with it as it is.
okay. Thank you very much. And as you said,
No,
I'll
no,
just have to
Simon,
do
if you
some.
can just pull it, if you can just upload it, maybe we can go with it the way it was.
Um,
Please share. I was saying we shall proceed without the full presentation because we cannot see the slide. Thank you.
so you cannot see my presentation.
No, I'm only seeing your name. I don't know whether Joseph, you can see the presentation.
Okay. Let me do
No, you need to go to the
because
document and click on it and it will show.
okay, I have I'm at the document now.
Okay. Wow. Because sharing is showing like, wow.
We'll do the sharing. Um, am I
Great.
sharing at all?
Now it's almost there.
What is the next one?
Uh, I think we can proceed with that now. Please
Okay,
proceed. We can read
I'm
it.
really sorry that time.
And it's reading
Um,
AU Financial Autonomy Agenda.
yes. Okay, I'll
Uh,
start with that. Thought I couldn't do it
yes.
better than that. Yeah, I just must say that I agree heavily with me. And indeed, as Joseph did point out, the budget is heavily funded by external partners, which introduces strategic vulnerabilities, donor-driven priorities, which are most times very unreliable, and they dictate funding allocations, which does not necessarily align with the African Union's priorities. My experience in Somalia and also the AU are much more serious than we can actually put across, and which
Did we lose Simon? Dr. Otele?
Yes, I'm also struggling to hear Simon.
So I think it's on your end. Oh my goodness, just to the main meeting. Hello, my apologies.
Yes, thank you so much. Are you able to see my slide?
Simon, maybe he dropped off.
Yes.
Oh, you are
No,
back.
no.
We lost you.
I'm back, but yes, I had some hiccup here. But do you see my slide at all?
No, if you can upload afresh.
Maybe we can drop.
Does it appear? Does it appear? It says I'm sharing my slide from this side.
It says you are sharing.
Yes, I've shared. Yes, this is my share. About
Now,
this approach, we are likely to run into some members because of fiscal constraints that may hinder full compliance. I also would have wished that the proposal by Joseph is accompanied by a strong legal enforcement so that we have a structured mechanism to ensure consistent revenue collection, which is not well integrated. Now, the issue with the import levies is that most of the AU member states, actually 44 of them, are signatories to WTO's most favored districts additional levies. And until that is unlocked, we are bound to run into a challenge with the proposal by Joseph. We also have small island economies which would be disproportionately affected. And I also think that unless we have a strong enforcement mechanism, which is not in place, we'll have the challenges with how we can enforce the proposal. So in my view, I would like to suggest some alternative proposal, but alongside what Joseph had actually provided. One, which is a tiered member state contribution, so that instead of a uniform 0.2% levy, there should be differentiation based on economic strength and disparities in fiscal capacity of each member state. Because if we go by a generalized approach, as suggested by Joseph, we're likely to have a disproportionate effect onto smaller and low-income economies and will not fully reap from leveraging large economies. We do have some high-income economies like Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt, which contribute significantly because of their high GDP. Then we have the middle-income ones. Then we have the low-income states. So this, if we are to get the best out of them, we need something that is fair and takes into account their capacities and physical abilities to contribute. So I also think that we need to look at diversification of the revenue streams to avoid heavy reliance on import levies, which conflict with the WTO agreements. I propose a more diversified approach. One is the FTT of 2.2% levy on intra-African financial transactions, which, as stated, burdens trade-dependent economies, providing both feasibility and physical liability. We could also consider carbon taxes of $3 per ton levy on major emitters, which can actually raise up to 500 million annually. We also have quite some substantial money that we can tap into, the diaspora bonds, which, if we did so, like I remember in 2023, it yielded about 95 billion remittances into the continent. So we could actually go for bonds, and these bonds can generate about $2 billion annually. So this combined approach ensures sustainability and long-term growth. But that's not enough. We need to also go after strengthening legal and institutional reforms to ensure that there is compliance. And I suggest that we have a more focused institutional arrangement in the name of introducing African Union Financial Authority. And this will ensure that it will not only manage the funds and the funding system, but it will also ensure that it is efficiently managed and the resources are adequately and properly allocated. We could also strengthen compliance through strengthening the Africa Court of Justice to ensure that financial compliance is also adhered to. We could introduce compulsory contributions and penalties, and also introduce independent audits to ensure additional transparency layers. This has been done in the EU, which enforces compliance through legal frameworks, and actually we cannot continue as AU with the voluntary financing, which has largely not been effective. And we could implement mandatory performance-based budgeting as well. And to me, we could introduce, like Joseph did point at, independent bodies to do the oversight for purposes of credibility. I would like to conclude that it is actually a true moment, as Joseph did call us, to say relying on external financing is unsustainable because it is a threat to our sovereignty and also it's a threat to our policy autonomy. The proposals by Joseph are very good because they call for urgency in terms of self-funding, but they do not address enforcement mechanism, and also they fall short of financial sustainability and legal feasibility, which I have proposed that if we look integrated some of these ideas into his major proposal, we can have something much more pragmatic and more reliable. And as such, we need a more comprehensive, multi-layered financing strategy that offers something more viable and a pathway that AU financial autonomy can be achieved. So my view is that we introduce a tiered member state contribution model, which is diversified in terms of revenue streams. And as such, the issues of FTT, carbon taxation, and diaspora bonds, and strengthening institutional governance will have to give us the leverage that we need. What is the overall that we need to anticipate to get as a benefit? One is that using this multi-layered approach will generate resources that can enable us to reduce donor dependence by at least 80% in the next 10 years. And we can also achieve a stable annual budget of 3.5 billion, at the same time strengthening our financial sovereignty, even with the limited economic strain. So I want to join Joseph to say that yes, we must adopt a proposed structure. And to me, it must be a diversified structure. but one which is enforceable, a financing model that will enable us arrive at something much more feasible, much easily attainable, and which does not necessarily provide a huge burden on small economies, and it does not overburden the big economies. Thank you so much. I hope this makes a contribution to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Simon. In spite of the technological challenges, you have really articulated issue very well, and we have followed you in your presentation and key issues that you have raised, especially with regard to the 0.2 import levy or import tax that would go to AU. Now it's my great honor and privilege to invite the second discussant. After that, we are going to have Dr. Mensah respond before we can pick a few on the questions or issues that have been raised on from the audience. So just before Dr. Otele takes the mic, allow me to do a quick introduction of who Oscar is. Oscar is a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi, Department of Political Science and Public Participation. So he's our colleague in the university based at the Department of Political Science. He is also the chairman of the department, a position he's been holding for the last 6 months. But beyond that, in terms of research, of working experience as a researcher, as a scholar, and also as a lecturer in the University of Nairobi. He's spread areas of specialization, cutting across lecturing, research, consultancy, and community services. He is well known internationally in areas of research on Africa-China relations, especially Africa Agency within China-Africa relations, China-Africa transport infrastructure, and China engagement in the energy sectors. He has also been carrying out research in response to other emerging in areas of other emerging powers to China and China engagement in Africa. When Dr. Mensah was presenting about the sources of finance, which we have seen that over 70%, 75% is from external financing. China is a critical player in this space. And therefore, going by the same slogan that who pays the piper, call the tune, China is a formidable force within AUC. And Dr. Otele has been researching in this area for many years, so he has a wealth of knowledge and experience in that space. He's also a co-researcher in Africa-wide survey or governance and economic development survey, which we call Afrobarometer, that is based here at IDS. So join me, colleagues, in welcoming and thanking Dr. Otele for agreeing to be the second discussant to Professor Mensah's presentation. Over to you, Dr. Otele. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Maybe we can request Simon to pull down the presentation. Simon? Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Director Professor Paul Kamau, for your kind introduction. I also join my colleague in congratulating Joseph on his presentation, quite informative. And in the same spirit, I join Simon in offering my appreciation of Joseph's presentation. I start from the point of acknowledging the effort by Institute for Development Study in organizing this timely seminar. Indeed, funding for the African Union has, grappled minds of several policymakers and academia. And indeed, Joseph has offered several proposals regarding how the continent can proceed forward with this subject. And just to appreciate my the other discussant, Simon, for also pointing up a few gaps that we need to consider in this kind of discussion. I follow the same format and I pick it up in this way, beginning from the aspect of predictable funding for the African Union. And my view is, picking up from where Joseph left, that the call for predictable funding is indeed critical, given that AU needs requires financial autonomy and effective implementation of its program. But of course, we all know that predictable funding will allow AU to plan and execute its initiative without relying on the unpredictable. You see, the donors, even the China, as Professor has just mentioned, on and off this predictability, AU needs to find a way to deal with. And therefore, this discussion will have benefit, further in terms of pointing out how the EU could manage volatility in the global economy. All right? For instance, how will the EU maintain financial sustainability during global turndown or period of economic instability within member states is a question that we need to talk about when we are discussing this predictable funding. My view will be we start thinking about practical mechanisms that could ensure this predictability. If I got Joseph's presentation right, there's something I mentioned about, is it a reserve fund, where I'm saying perhaps we now need to start talking about African Union Emergency Fund. I'm not sure whether it is, but if it's not there, probably this will be a useful starting point, or creating as proposed in the presentation, a financial reserve to buffer, against economic shocks. Now, the other bit that also intrigued my space as Joseph made his presentation is the conceptual framework around the assessed contribution, and I'm talking about principles here. And I said, yes, principle of fairness, predictability, flexibility, and compliance. These were well presented by Joseph. Effectively, they will actually ensure, equitability, and in a sense also allowing members to be incentivized as they look forward to fulfill their financial obligation. But now, that is, as I said, is conceptual, but in practice, what is the challenge when it comes to implementation? For example, how can the EU ensure that fairness is maintained given the disparity in economic capacity among member states. The other question we might think around is, are there mechanisms that should be put in place to ensure compliance, as my other discussant has said, borrowing from EU models, for example, especially from states that are economically weak or politically unstable. So the question of how can we operationalize this principle is something that now we need to think around how the entities have achieved this. And the presenter made the reference to EU. Simon has also made a reference to EU. Should we start thinking about a weighted contribution model, as mentioned, based on GDP, population size, and other factors that reflect each state's ability to pay? Is this something that is doable? Along the lines that have been suggested by Simon, the issue of compliance, again, it's at heart of trying to see how state can voluntarily implement these issues. So how then do we deal with non-compliance? My view is perhaps EU may think around introducing progressive sanctions for non-compliance, so that then we can also see member states commit to participate in these endeavors. What about this weight issue of member states vis-a-vis partners' contribution? Well, it's an exciting point to appreciate the role of external partners in terms of their contribution. But again, as others have said, they come with their own priorities, they come with their own conditions, both political and economic. And so then, how can EU navigate, strike a balance between independence and partnership? Could we start thinking about creating a balanced funding structure? For example, my view will be the EU could explore funding from both member states and external sources in a way that ensures more autonomy. And this could be done in this way, setting limits on how much of EU's budget come from partners. I'm just thinking aloud. Maybe I missed this from Joseph's presentation, but could we start thinking, around that aspect? Again, the question of budget reforms, as Joseph made excellent suggestions, which I agree. The idea here is streamlining financial processes that will foster better management of limited resources on the continent. So how then can we insert reforms that will ensure accountability? Do we have tight financial audits? There are several structures. You mentioned those structures. Do we have accompanying audit structures that can actually, address issues of transparency in budgeting processes? So my proposal will be a comprehensive financial audit mechanism also needs to be embedded within those structures, but also allowing even other actors to question what is happening in EU. We cannot purport to forget the voices of civil society, for example, allowing civil society to make a suggestion on the way forward. Prof, how many minutes I see? How many minutes I just need
Maybe
like five.
one you can wind up, 1 minute.
One. Huh? All right. The other aspect that also caught my attention was on challenges of implementing the import levy. So how can we go about that? Should we talk about offering gradual implementation timelines or targeted financial support for affected states so that then we limit the chances of resistance? Well, I see my 1 minute is almost done, but in conclusion, from where Joseph left on recommendation, they are good. I will suggest for concrete policy action in terms of outlining a very clear timeline and action plan for each recommendation so that that can be well conceived by member states. Thank you, Prof, for the opportunity. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Otele. Please, let's appreciate him for the well-articulated rejoinder. And just before I bring Prof to speak for a minute, allow me to ask Dr. Fred Pomenya, Fred, to just give 2 minutes. 2 minutes, Fred. One, to make just a comment about the presentation, and secondly, to speak to ULI Africa.
Thank you.
Fred. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much. ULI Africa is about doctor research in Africa. And our target is rigor, which rigor will come from interdisciplinarity. Those are tough words, those are deep words, and I encourage you to go to the link that I've posted, look at it, join the effort. Now I need to recognize 3 people. 1, Dr. Mensah, Joseph. When I contacted Joseph, first it was very difficult to find somebody who could speak to this topic. It was very difficult. Joseph has hidden rigor in him. He's not two people who will post messages on LinkedIn with partial different questions. So Joseph, thank you. You've had to wake up very early for this. Number 2, Winnie, Professor Mitchell. She's not with us, but Winnie has been immense. And you will hear a lot more in the series coming. Number 3, Paul. We thank IDS for being with us, with ULI, in bringing some of these deeper challenges of our place, of our continent, to the people. The one thing I need to make clear, why we are running this series as a pipeline of public lectures, our domain, our goal is the doctoral student. You, the doctoral students who have been posting messages and have requested to join ULI, you are our target. Thank you very much. There's a lot more to come. You can pick the PDF that I posted. It tells you the topics that we will be looking at in the weeks ahead. I thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Amonya, for that vote of thanks that has done, and also for letting members in this platform to know more about the ULI. And thank you also for linking us with Dr. Mensah, who is our key discussant today. We hope that this is just but the beginning of many series that we can co-host with Uli and on different topics. Thank you very much. I'm cautious of the time. Our aim is always to finish by 3:30. That is depending on the location one with half past the hour. I see we have only 7 minutes. So I would like to give 2 minutes to Dr. Mensah to speak to the rejoinder by Dr. Otele and Mr. Mulongo about the direction, the proposals, before I open the floor. Dr. Mensah. Very briefly, because we'll have another series.
Sure. I'll be quick. It's in order to allow for question period. I'll just take a minute. I know that most of the presentation centered the discussants. First of all, I thank both of them, Simon and Oscar, for a brilliant rebuttal, which would help. I wish that those in AU were here to pick up. But let me just say that one, the 0.2% is not my proposal. It's something which is being implemented. It's on the books of AU and soliciting advice for that. The second thing, in terms of the discussions here that's centered on the need to take the size of the economy into consideration, I would like to tell you that in terms of the African Union, they have something called the scale of assessment. And the scale of assessment is based on GDP, is based on debt, is based on other factors that goes in determine the ability to pay per country. So the size of the GDP is taken into account when it decides on how much each country should pay. The other thing to which I want to point out is that we should also know that in the African Union, it has a tier system where the bigger economies are the ones who pay more. I think they bear about 40% of the budget. The last time, I've not looked at the numbers recently, the names, but it was Morocco, it was, what do you call it, Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, Libya used to be there, but after Gaddafi, they dropped out. So there is this, and Algeria. These are the countries that are tiers. And countries like Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya, and all that are in the middle, who bear about 35% of the budget. And then the last is about 15% with smaller countries in terms of the economy. So the GDP, the size of the economy, plays a part in determining the size of the how much you should pay. The other point which I quickly want to say is that in terms of the 0.2%, is not, which is being implemented by the AU, it's not on financial transactions. It is on imports, goods and services that comes into the country. So it's not that. And in terms of not being WTO compliant, it is WTO compliant because now we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. That is what EU, that's why EU's imports levies based on its external tariffs are compliant in that sense. In terms of having an enforcement, I would say that I agree with both Simon and Oscar that we need to have a robust way of compliance. Yes, countries say they will, but they don't. So we have to find a way. And also, we should continue to insist on the AU Commission to be very prudent in the use of the funds. So let me stop here for now so that you can have time to ask a few questions before we call it off. Again, thanks to all of you for being here. And I think if we have all of us trying to call on countries to make their part, I think the AU vision can be achieved quickly.
All right. I will allow one or two rejoinder. If you can just raise your hand. I see Douglas Wanja. Who else? I'll give like 2 or 3 for very quick questions or comment.
Yeah, I would like to question. No, the hand is not there where I am. Sorry.
Okay, I will come to you, Atieno Kili, in a minute. The third one, I'm looking for that one. Okay.
Mine is
Allow
up.
me to.
Mine is up.
No, I mentioned Douglas, then we go to Atieno Kili. So Douglas, one very brief.
So thank you so much, Prof. And I couldn't thank IDS more for organizing such a series that is so illuminating and so live and relevant to the ongoing issues in the African continent. And above all, also giving a echo to our professor for from Ghana for giving us such a good presentation. And I think as a person who has also had a touch with the African Union, and I'm happy that African Union here is represented by APRM, because I have noted that Lennon Munyae here of APRM is here. Should we, maybe this is a question to the professor and all these people who have made comments, that should we not be worried about the structural challenges other than 60 years of still talking about the same thing? Because AU now is over 60 years, or actually 60 years old, and we are still talking about financial hardships. Should we now go? Should we not go back where we are thinking about formation of AU and ask ourselves, how did we find or start a body that we could not fund as the African continent? Because when you talk about the sustainability issues and the way we look at the African continent, the way all member states are at different levels, why can't we just go back to the roots and see where we got it all wrong? Because I think when we talk about AU, and everyone who has had a chance to go and read the formulation and formation of AU, all I find in the formulation of AU is that every organ, most of the organs of AU in the establishment were actually established in the structure of EU. So if EU was our model of establishment of AU, then how can we talk about African Union and the African we want in the by 2063 if we are not sustainable in financing? So thank you so much, and I couldn't be prouder of listening to this conversation. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Allow me to bring Atieno Kili, then Lennon Munyae. Lennon, you'll be next in a few. In the meantime,
thank you.
Mary Mwangi, kindly identify some 2 or 3 questions from the chat. Okay, Atieno.
Thank you very much. I thank the Institute for Development Studies, the presenters of today, and everybody. Now, in summary of the question that I would like to ask, if you analyze from 1960s up to now, you start with African Organization of African Unity, then you come to African Union. All activities have been funded outside Africa. And now, when you look at the scenario, is there a time when African Union will be able to fund her activities without depending on donors? Is there any time? Because according to me, I don't see that time. What I can suggest might not be palatable, but actually it is better to say it rather than to keep quiet. We can start embracing revolution and activism in order for change to occur. Because change cannot be brought, as said by Karl Marx, by intellectual contemplation. We need to act and change everything. Because talking will lead us nowhere. The people who are funding African Union activities, they are gaining a lot and they are not happy when we can fight and then get autonomy and fund our activities. And that one I see is a real issue. They will not leave us alone because when they fund our activities, they gain a lot. But we cannot sit back and let them continue funding our activities. Yet Africa is one of the richest continents in the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Atieno Kili Kodhiambo. I believe my team is taking note of that. Lennon, please. And thank you, Lennon, for joining all the way from APRM.
Congratulations, Prof. My name is Lennon Munyai from the African Peer Review Mechanism. I'm very delighted to be here joining this very important and timely dialogue. I think it becomes more important, especially this year, because the African Union's theme is looking at reparations, and it becomes then very difficult to then request former colonial powers in the name of the EU and other countries to fund AU programs while also demanding reparations. The two won't mix. So, and more of these programs that are supporting Africa's own interests in Agenda 2063, and we won't be able to achieve Agenda 2063 if we can't find our own union. So I would like to really congratulate you, Prof. Paul, and your team at IDS for this timely discussion. I should also let you know that we are open at the APRM if you reach out. For some of our experts, I'm aware that in the coming weeks you'll be hosting another discussion on the African Credit Rating Agency initiative that the APRM has been championing. So we'll be open to have some of our colleagues come and also share their perspective. Again, congratulations, and we hope we continue having these platforms to engage.
Thank you very, very much, Lennon, joining us all the way from South Africa. We are greatly honored. You can see the whole globe is here, not to mention the continent. So thank you very much. Mary Mwangi, maybe you may need to pick a few of the comments. Mary?
Yes, Prof, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So I'll just read a few comments and a few questions. So
Sure.
there is a comment from Morimi Njoka. The session needed to discuss what AU or AUC will do to cushion itself from possible backlash from the global north, who heavily funded, obviously influenced the AU agenda. Then there is a question from Francis Okech. Why do we have a lot of undertone difference and mistrust among AU members, which is threatening their unity, as most countries are now closing their borders instead of opening them? And then there are a couple of questions from Brian Kefa to Prof. Mensah. Do you think going back to Gaddafi's call on having a universal African currency can also emancipate AU's economy from Western economy? Can we maybe adopt a regional approach as a building block to the bigger picture of AU structural financing architecture? Then the other questions are, what's your take on African states' view on sovereign donation to the AU like EU? Will it really be realized lest we forget external forces? And then is it time that AU now dictate foreign relation to see finance realization? I think that's mainly it, Prof. From what I can see, most of the other comments are just to appreciate the insightfulness of the discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. You will allow me that to say that this debate cannot end in 1.5 hours. And in the interest of time, I just want to say that we will be having a series of these just to check and take stock of how we are progressing as a continent in terms of promoting financial stability. Thank you, Oli, for linking us with this very, very credible and informative speakers. So, but now I would like to ask maybe Oscar to make a parting comment, then Simon, before we get to Joseph to bring it to a close. But just as we go there, Joseph, have we taken stock of what would this 0.2% impact on African intra-trade? Or when we say import in the into the continent, is it import from outside the continent or including what African countries trade with each other? So over to you, Oscar.
Thank you.
As your final words.
My final word, just to commend our presenter and of course other contributors. And as I did say, there's opportunity for learning from the models. There's nothing harmful from learning how other entities have successfully initiated these funding models. What is more important is underscoring the practical realities on the continent as we infuse in strategies that confine our local realities in Africa. For me, that is what is important as far as funding is concerned. So thank you once again, Prof. And we hope to sustain this conversation.
Thank you. Mary, kindly mute. Thank you very much. Over. Mary, kindly mute. Simon, please.
Thank you so much, Prof. And thank you indeed, my colleagues. I think this is the parting moment. And thank you for your very wealthy contributions. I can see questions which came in are really huge in terms of what we should be able to be doing. But I can say basically that one is we do not have proper enforcement mechanisms because we've made many attempts at this to ensure that the AU gets more independence in this. And some of us who have been in the field really have been frustrated lots. The other one is I think there is the elite disinterest in the AU strengthening, because some of them see the AU as a diplomatic club rather than a functional governing body. I tend to see that as well. And then, of course, the AU remains a weak institutional mechanism or framework that does not necessarily have capacity to enforce certain decisions. So at the end of the day, it is just a meeting point. The Secretariat is the Commission is mainly a coordination mechanism. Lastly, the external influence should not be understated. There are many theories about this, but I can also tell you that the external actors do not want us to gain that level of sovereignty that we want to, both at a national level and also collectively at a continental level. This is something that we have to continue fighting and much more strongly. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very, very much, Simon. Allow me to bring Joe to speak to a few of the comments, but be sure we'll keep knocking on your door for further discussion in this very interesting topic. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much. Let me just summarize most of the questions, particularly with one just question about the need for us to go back to the drawing board to see what happened when we formed the OAU. I must tell you that the AU periodically undertakes reforms. Looking back, we've had a series of that, with the last one being the reforms under President Paul Kagame, which tried to structure the AU, and the implementation of the 0.2% is the result of part of the reforms that took place. With regards to the others, I think Artinio was talking about why can't we be self-reliant, and this is the discussion we're having today. I think we should all be able to get there. And Lennon's point, which is mainly in terms of, I think his was more of giving us updates on what is coming and what the APRM is doing. And so I think APRM is integral part of this discussion on what do you call it, the 0.2%, the self-financing in general. Now, what I would like to leave on, and then there was a question on the common currency, whether that would achieve, I think that's a separate entity in that regard. It's another project that the AU wants to embark on, where they would like us to have one common currency. I think this is a topic that is going on and it's under serious discussion. I'm of the view that it can be done. If we look into it, it can be done. With regards to the question whether the 0.2% fall would affect intra-African trade, no. You know, we have the AFCFTA, and the AFCFTA, 90% of the goods are zero tariffs. So there are no tax on that. So the 0.2% doesn't apply to imports within Africa. It's only imports coming from outside Africa. That's the one that attracts the 0.2%. Let me end by saying that, look, I think we all are frustrated that we always, in terms of the AU, we've been discussing. And most the youth want us to see action. So I think there are good ideas that have always been on the table. There are good ideas that our ancestors or forefathers or whoever founded the organization they have. And I think it's about time that we move from dreams into reality. And part of it, in terms of achieving our dreams, would be able to be paying for whatever we want to do. And so I think we should all try and do our best to be able to make our union self-sufficient, sustainable, predictable resources. And the way to do it is perhaps 0.2%. I know Simon was talking about maybe 3% on the carbon emitters. There are several ideas that I think we could all put on the table and bring it to bear. But let's try and support our leaders so that we can advance the development on the continent. And lastly, I must say that I thank you all. I thank the organizers. I thank Fred for waking me up and telling me about this to come and do it. And I'm happy to do it. And I think I've learned a lot. The organization has given, the continent has given me a lot. I had the opportunity to work at ECA and I interacted with AU. I learned a lot and I keep learning. And I'm very appreciative for the opportunity that I had to work with one of the brightest people, you know, in AU, Africans, you know, always thinking about how to advance the continent. And so I thank you. I thank each and every one of you for making it possible for me to be here this morning. Oh, sorry, this afternoon for you in Nairobi, but this morning for me. Anyway,
morning,
thank you
we
so
all
much.
talk about the time when we are, which it's applying to us, and it's so natural that that's what we do. But we apologize. I know in Canada it's very early in the morning.
No, there's no need for an apology. I mean, when it comes to issues on the continent, nothing like an apology. I've done it at 2 a.m.
You will even wake up in the middle of the night with your pajama.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much,
thank you all.
Joe. We appreciate. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We are so grateful. And just before we bring this to a close, I will allow my colleague who has been spearheading this process together with Professor Winnie, and that is Pascaline Basile, to give a vote of thanks and any communication from the director's office with regards to our seminars, and then we will adjourn. Over to you, Pascaline.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. And I thought we had concluded this, but mine is just to say thank you once again to the speakers, to Joe, our main presenter, and our discussant, Simon Mulongo, Dr. Oskotele, Fred, Professor Winnie Mitula, who is not able to join us. She has passed her good regards to all of us. We hold our seminars on Thursdays at 2 p.m. East African time. It's 1 hour, 30 minutes, or 2 hours, depending on your request. And we are hoping to do this once again. It's a special seminar series on the 13th. I have just shared a link. And once the date approaches, we're going to share for publicity purposes and other logistical arrangements. So thank you so much. And it is a good afternoon from IDS and to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We can now adjourn. Have a good day, good evening, good night, wherever you're joining us from. Expect to hear from us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Suba. Good to see you.
Good to see
Bye.
you too.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Penina.